All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Opine Dine, a 14 free session virtual panel series brought to you by the Maryland Human Trafficking Task Force's Public Awareness Subcommittee. My name is Danielle Thomas, and I will be your moderator tonight. I'm the Victim Services Coordinator for the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy, and I'm especially honored to be guiding our conversation this evening. Now, before we dive into our topic, let's go over a few housekeeping items. This session is being recorded for the first 55 minutes, so it can be shared with those who are unable to attend live. If you prefer not to appear in the recording, please keep your camera off and avoid unmuting during the recorded portion. The recording will end before the audience Q&A, so you're able to ask questions freely during the final portion of the session without being recorded. Please keep your microphone muted unless you're speaking. The chat is open throughout the session, so feel free to introduce yourself, share resources, and submit questions for our panelists. Our chat monitor, Melinda Boyer, will be collecting questions and surfacing them during the audience Q&A portion beginning around 6:55. If you experience technical difficulties, try leaving and rejoining the meeting or send a message in the chat and we'll do our best to assist. If at any point during tonight's conversation something feels difficult, please know that support is available. The National Human Trafficking Hotline is 1-888-373-7888, and the crisis text line is text Be Free to 233-733. We encourage engagement throughout the panel, so feel free to use the chat and share thoughts, resources, respond to discussion prompts. We simply ask that all comments remain respectful, on topic, and considerate of the diverse experiences and perspectives of everyone participating. The Opine Dine series was created as a way to find innovative and engaging opportunities to educate our communities about human trafficking and the intersections of vulnerability and exploitation. Since our first session earlier this summer, we have explored a wide range of topics and learned about the many incredible resources throughout Maryland. But tonight we are joined by several of Maryland's regional navigators for what I know will be a meaningful and informative conversation. But before I introduce our panelists, I want to do something a little different by first providing some background on the Regional Navigator program and how it came to be in Maryland. So in 2019, the Child Sex Trafficking Screening and Services Act was passed, establishing the Regional Navigator program, which provides services in every jurisdiction across Maryland. Regional navigators provide direct services, case management, and advocacy to individuals under the age of 24 who are at risk, suspected, or identified as victims of sex or labor trafficking. The law also requires that law enforcement and local Department of Social Services refer those cases to the appropriate local regional navigator. Today, there are 14 regional navigator programs that serve the communities across Maryland. These programs are housed within local rape crisis centers, child advocacy centers, and other nonprofit organizations. The Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy provides grant funding, technical assistance, and policy oversight for the statewide program. I have personally had the honor of serving as a regional navigator where I created, developed, and implemented the Regional Navigator program for Maryland's Lower Shore, covering Somerset, Wycomico, and Worcester counties. I'm incredibly grateful that I can continue being a part of this work by directly supporting navigator teams across the state. These advocates provide a unique and essential service within Maryland's response to human trafficking, and I am eager for you to hear more about their work as we begin tonight's conversation. So with that said, I will go ahead and introduce tonight's panelists. First, we have Erica Fielder. Erica Fielder is the Human Trafficking Regional Navigator for Cecil County. She is located at Cecil County Child Advocacy Center, and she started her career working at the Cecil County Department of Social Services in 2007, working as a foster care worker for 5 years, then as a CPS assessor and forensic interviewer, assigned to the CAC for 10 years. After 10 years at the CAC, Erica transitioned to her current position with the Cecil County government as the Regional Navigator for Cecil County. Erica's current responsibilities include coordinating services for survivors of sex and labor trafficking, collaborating with community partners for support and services for survivors, implementing and providing training to professionals and the community on human trafficking and Cecil County's screening and assessment tools, and co-facilitating the Cecil County Human Trafficking Task Force. Erica, it's so nice to have you with us tonight. Next, we have with us Adriana Smith. Adriana Smith is the Human Trafficking Regional Navigator Manager at Hartley House, in Frederick County, where she provides trauma-informed advocacy, case management, and systems coordination for youth at risk or impacted by human trafficking throughout the county. She collaborates with schools and law enforcement, child welfare agencies, healthcare providers, and community partners to improve identification of trafficking and connect youth to specialized services. Adriana earned her Bachelor's of Arts in Psychology with a minor in Sociology from Hood College and is a credentialed advocate and Maryland Victim Assistance Specialist. She is passionate about survivor-centered advocacy, multidisciplinary collaboration, and educating professionals and communities on recognizing and responding to human trafficking. Adriana, it's so nice to have you with us tonight as well. All right, now we have Julia, a licensed master social worker with 10 years of experience working alongside the immigrant community and 4 years specializing in the anti-trafficking field. As a daughter of immigrants herself, she is dedicated to uplifting marginalized groups and advancing social justice for all. Julia is the Regional Navigator for Montgomery and Prince George's County with the University of Maryland Safe Center and serves as the Victim Services Co-Chair within the Montgomery County Human Trafficking Prevention Committee. Julia, it's so nice to have you here with us as well. All right, and last but not least, we have Jasmine. Jasmine is a dedicated social work professional and Baltimore native. She holds a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from the University of Maryland and a master's degree in social work from Morgan State. She currently serves as the Regional Navigator Supervisor for Anne Arundel County with Everstand and is a victim advocate working with survivors of human trafficking, acting as a liaison to connect them with critical support services. Jasmine brings extensive experience from her previous roles with the state of Maryland, including positions as a family investment specialist and parole and probation agent. During her graduate studies, she interned with the Baltimore City Circuit Court, where she supported the mental health court under the supervision of the clinical director. Jasmine is deeply passionate about trauma-informed care and advancing equitable access to justice and services for vulnerable populations. Jasmine, thank you for being here with us tonight. Okay. So now that you guys are all introduced, I know that I have been talking about this panel for probably since we were like even just talking about the Opine and Dine series. I was like, well, we need a Navigator panel. Clearly, as I tried to lay out in the intro as well, I'm very biased towards the Navigator program because I think that it is super awesome as a former Navigator and still being able to work very closely with you guys. I know there was like bits and pieces of kind of what the Navigator is and what the Navigator does intertwined throughout all of your bios, but I would love to throw it out to all of you. And for those who may be unfamiliar with the work of what a regional navigator is, because let's be real, Maryland is one of the only states, at least in this mid-Atlantic region, that has a regional navigator program. So we are very unique in that way. So there's not a lot of people who understand what the program is or truly understands what it means to be a regional navigator. So I would love to see, like, what are some common misconceptions? I know I'm going to say this and you guys are going to be like, I already know, Danielle, like, to stop. But like, what does your actual day-to-day look like? Who are your clients? Like, give me kind of like the lowdown of what it means to be a navigator. I am going to throw it over to Erica first.
So as a navigator, I feel like we wear many hats. It's hard to just stay in that one silo. We wear different hats to different agencies and services that we work with as well. I think sometimes when police, reach out to us with, discovery of a survivor or victim, they're like, oh, here, you take all of this, and it's like a magic wand almost. So they are like, well, you're gonna save her, and you're going him or her, or you're going to give them everything they need, and they are just going to be perfectly fine. They're fine now. So there's that. Part of the role of the regional navigator also is, while we're feeding off the misconceptions that we wear many hats, we also have to understand who should be wearing those hats, like which agencies need to be involved, what services need to be involved. So this is where the navigator part comes in, because we have to kind of navigate what services are needed depending on the client's needs and how the client is. You can have a client that comes in all the way on the side of the spectrum A to all the way on the other side of the spectrum to Z. So there's really not a lot of expectations of what the victim coming in is going to be like. They could not recognize themselves as a victim at all, or they know exactly why they're there. So we have to adapt. So a lot of my day is spent being adaptable.
I love that. I really like that the imagery of those words. Jasmine, I'd love to throw it over to you. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, definitely. When we talk about the misconceptions, I think Erica did an amazing job with introduction to the program. And as she said, we wear many hats as being the regional navigator. But for me, if I have to talk about misconceptions in the regional navigator program, is for us, what we hear is the ideal survivor or the ideal victim. There is not one size fits all. A lot of misconceptions that even data and research is that majority of the survivors are women, where we know with research, a lot of survivors that are underreported are individuals that are born men and those that might not identify as a gender themselves. It's very underreported. So for me, if I'm adding anything to what Eric has stated, would be the misconception of what a perfect survivor looks like. What a survivor looks like in Anne Arundel County looks very different than what a survivor looks like in Baltimore City or even in the lower shores. So I think being able to show up for a survivor and listen to their story and believe them is the most important thing or aspect for me that I would like to add to. Also, in regards to that perfect or ideal image of a survivor, we also talk about the economic status of a survivor too. Not all of survivors come from poor or low income. From that perspective, I would like to add on, if I speak about the Regional Navigator program itself, Erica did an amazing job with highlighting our role is to navigate and know who those community partners are. But some of the services look different for our younger population, the 0 to 18 versus the 18 to 24. In addition to that, we also, with our grant, our cutoff age is 24, but our survivors don't just stop when they turn 24. Some of our survivors are much older than that. This one of the survivors that I worked with was 55, and the youngest I've worked with was 18 months. So just being accessible, and as Erica said, wearing those many hats and navigating the system with our survivor being there, it looks very different from day to day. I think for me to understand the Regional Navigator program, I kind of break it down into like three different pillars where we work in that education pillar one, educating the community about what human trafficking looks like or what it could possibly be, as well as who are our community partners, getting to know our multidisciplinary team, also understanding their mission and what they're looking to provide the clients, right? And not trying to duplicate those services, but bring those survivors to those that system, right? And help them understand. And then I look at it as the data collection. For us within our county, we also have to provide the data to the governor's office. In addition to the data, is not just the numbers of who we're serving or the gender in which we're serving or the population what we're serving, but also some of the needs and the service gaps. And then the very last one is outreach, which is something that we're doing here right now. And with the outreach comes the direct services. How did I miss that? The direct services working one-on-one with those clients. And it looks very different from serving just the client itself to also those secondary survivors, working with their families and making sure that they understand the needs that the client might have, as well as also being honest with the needs that they might need as a family too. So for me, Erica, that's the only thing that I would add or kind of contribute to the conversation. But Danielle, back to you. Let me know if I missed anything.
No, I love that because I think, and honestly, you and Erica, even just talking about that, like what I wrote down was like there's, and y'all already know, like there's this misconception of this ideal victim, right? And we can sit here and list all of the media that have unfortunately played into the society's mentality of what that ideal victim looks like, but it's also like two sides of the same coin because it's we have this idea of this ideal victim, but then I think, and to no one's fault, right? But I think that like what Erica said, like we just have this magic wand and just gonna like fix them and like they'll never sell themselves again. And like, oh my gosh, navigators are just magical. So I think it's also like the like I said, the other side of the same coin of like we have this unrealistic expectation of what a victim is, but also an unrealistic expectation of what victim services to a very complex and honestly messy victim population, victim pool, this human anti-trafficking field. is different than other victim services fields, right? And so I guess my question, and I'd love to throw it over to Julia to really talk about like how the beginning of the mess, if that makes sense. Like, yes, it's messy, yes, it's complex, but like what gets someone to that point? Is it ACE scores? Is it trauma? Is it nature nurture? Like clearly, like that's a both and, right? But like what really brings somebody to be supported by a regional navigator?
Yeah, thanks for bringing it to me, Danielle. And I think it's like you're saying, it's which is it this or that or a compilation of everything, right? And I think from my perspective, a lot of times it comes from the identification, right? So this person in some way had the bravery to share that something is not going okay to somebody, right? That being a teacher, that being a parent, that being a friend, another service provider, maybe an attorney, right? And so that's the first piece, right? Just to say something is going off here. I might not even be sure what exactly that is, right? But that it is not like good. And so that being said, that like we get referrals from child protective services, from schools, from people directly from the community. Sometimes when law enforcement's involved, they will share our information, right? And so we're getting referrals from left and right to connect with families. And the good thing that I see a lot of times with these referrals is that it's not always like confirmed entirely, right? It's not, we don't know fully that something has happened, but we're concerned because they're truant, because they're running away from home, because there's substance use, right? Etc. And so we're able to then step in. I think that's a beautiful part of the program is that we are so kind of like low barrier in that way that like if there is a concern and even if you're not sure, then like that's where you can come to Regional Navigator and we can see if we can connect you to our services or something else, right? And so that's kind of more or less like the technical way of how you get to this, right? But at the end of the day, it's somebody like also believing in that like something has to change more than anything, right? And they don't know exactly what that change is going to look like either, right? Which is where I think they find the kind of bravery to ask for help. But at the same time, it gets to that point of like, yeah, something is off here. I'm not feeling comfortable with what's going on and I need help. So I'm just gonna say something, I'm just gonna say that, right, to whoever my trusted person is. And that's kind of the biggest piece. A lot of times survivors are being mistreated by a trusted person, right? And so we need to know that there should be a secondary somewhere, right? Should something go left with this person, I know I have someone else who I can like kind of rely on and I can like let them know that something's going wrong, right? But I think that's kind of like the beginning steps, right? Apart from getting the community referrals, it really does come from the person themselves feeling ready to expose at least some part of whatever's happening to them.
I appreciate you saying that because I think that just to echo what you said, like that, I think that is one of the beauties of how our regional navigator program in Maryland is designed is that it is low barrier. Anybody who is at risk or suspected and really, and especially with like a cell phone, right? Like, and I know we're going to get into that conversation, but kids are way more at risk than they were even just like 5 years ago. So even if it's just like one person sending one picture to somebody, well, if it is returned with anything of value, well, federal definition of child sex trafficking, insert navigator here. And that comes with a lot of like a level of education, right? Because as the navigator program, now we have to really focus on the education for the community as like society, but also our community partners of what is human trafficking, what is child sex trafficking. And I say this a lot, and I clearly wear glasses. And I actually got my eyes checked last week. And you like sit there and then they like, can you see, is it better now? Is it not better now? And like all the things. And I truly believe that child sex trafficking is child sex abuse. But if you just like flip an extra lens onto that, we can see it just a little bit more clearly. Like, yes, and it is child sex trafficking. And again, that comes with this level of education all across the board, not just what is trafficking, but what does it mean to be at risk or not just at risk of trafficking, but at risk of exploitation and at risk of like grooming and all of these things. So I'd love to throw it over to Adriana. I know all of our navigators do a lot of extensive work with like Jasmine said, outreach and education in the community. But you specifically in Frederick, you guys have a really awesome team that does a lot of education. And I'd love to dive in a little bit more and have you share what that teamwork and collaboration looks like, not just in supporting survivors, but also some of that prevention work and that education and community outreach as well.
Of course, thank you. So we have a Department of Community Engagement that goes out to the schools all over Frederick County, and we just educate on human trafficking, sexual assault, domestic violence. We don't focus just on human trafficking because it can come out of domestic violence or sexual assault and build into human trafficking. So I think it's important to know all branches of where it can come from, whether that's family dynamics, wherever it can come from to lead to there. So it's not just like some people think like, oh, they're just selling people. Like it's not just, it doesn't look all the same. It's completely different ways that it can look when you approach it. And so in education aspect, that's what we do mainly. I go with the community engagement department and I go to schools and help them do presentations and just tell them the basics. And I personally think the best way you can learn is to just hear the real stories and just learn through what I've seen with my eyes, not me tell you statistics and all these numbers, because that's going to go in one ear and out the other. So I make it a real like this is, obviously I don't disclose confidentiality, like confidential things, but past survivors that are on our survivor speaking board and everything that have talked about their story and everything, I've told this is what happened. These are the resources we provided. This is how we responded very fastly and got that survivor where they are now. And it's really, I mean, I just presented to a whole bunch of high schoolers, and when I was talking, they're just like, oh, like you just see their mouths open. And it's honestly better to have that reaction than, you know what I mean? It's just better because now I know you're listening to me and you're retaining the information, and you're going to go home and be like, Mom, Dad, Aunt, Grandma, this is what human trafficking is. We have to watch out for this. And then that's what our next generation is going to be. So I think it's really important to be in schools and start early because that's when they're paying attention the most. And then I think with collaboration with all of in the community, it's really like I don't go a day without working with CPS, law enforcement, state's attorney's office. I'm always talking with all of them, but I think it's important that we all work together because at the end of the day, that survivor is going to work with a whole bunch of different people at the end of the road. So it's better if I'm that kind of, I always make this analogy, but if I'm that tree and they are the branches, so, they can grow from me, not saying I'm gonna, they're gonna be independent on their own, but I'm gonna I'm gonna water it. And then they're gonna be able to be good. And having that collaboration, having those good relationships with the community partners helps that, because if I call, they're like, okay, Adriana, you don't just call, because I'm not going to just call just to tell you a joke. You know what I mean? So I think it's really good to have, and it's also good to just like talk, like make jokes, like just not always talk about the serious things. I think that's how we have good community partners within Frederick County, because sometimes, yeah, we talk about the cases, we get help, we look at the resources, we do emergency MDT meetings, we do monthly MDT meetings, but we also just kind of talk like, hey, how's your job going? How's your day going? It's important to check up on your community partners and talk to them as just people. Because if you're constantly being like, tell me this, tell me that, tell me this, tell me that, they're going to be like, oh my gosh, Adriana, you are annoying. So I think that's the best part of Frederick County, which Jen built up. And I've kind of, taken over that role, which I'm super grateful for because it's been very smooth getting into that role with what she built and the foundation she planted.
Yeah, you guys we're definitely one of our pilot programs from what that was before my time. However, you guys have been doing some really great work in Frederick for a very long time. So we are just excited and honored to learn from some of what you guys are doing. And I know I had put this in the chat, and I think they had put the link in there as well. But I had recently, because your community outreach team shared at an MCASA Lunch and Learn about how they were able to start getting into the schools. And it was fascinating, absolutely fascinating, and so creative on how they were able to approach it. So just truly appreciate y'all's partnership. It's something that you said, this is going to be strange, something that you said reminded me of Candace's feet picture. And no, it is not Candace's feet. It is not her feet. We've already clarified this. However, when we're talking about like just being real, especially with students, like I literally told my mom the same analogy, like, hey, if somebody's going to offer you, what is it, like $500 for a picture of your feet, would you take it? My mom was like, yes. I'm like, yeah. And you're like, how old, and like have a house paid off and like are retired. And imagine if you're 16 living on the streets, even if you're 18 living on the streets, like, and somebody offers you that, and then it goes a little bit further and a little bit further and a little bit further, but like hands down, like let's be real, like if somebody offers me $500 for like that is groceries for the week. That is like, our society is set up in a way that even if, right, like even if we as human beings have like a good job and like a roof over our head, that doesn't mean that we're not out here like, oh, what if, and then we bring in additional vulnerabilities to youth or young adults who, let's be real, probably are in this situation because of some form of ACE score or vulnerability in the first place. And then you start just slowly planting these seeds of like, yeah, I can support myself. And not any PII, but I'd love to. I told you I was going rogue tonight. Not any PII, but I would love to chat with you guys about like what would be the case that comes to your mind of like, oh man, I would have never thought that. That is wild that trafficking happened from there. I will go first and tell you mine. I think all y'all have heard mine. But being able to support girls middle schoolers who create their own price list. So they have their images, videos, whatever, in a vault on their phone, and people are sending they're just fulfilling orders all day. So they're like, at school fulfilling orders, and they're not taking extra pictures and not taking extra videos. They're just like saved in their phone when they go through the day, and they are able to generate a significant amount of income. That to me was really surprising, because whenever we talk about like child sex trafficking, anything exchange that's anything sexual for any item of value, yes, that item of value is one of the ones that we typically think of all the time, right? Like money, food, shelter, those kind of things. Like she was clearly selling that for money. But the way that it was done was very interesting to me. So I'd love to, I'll throw it back. You know what? I'll throw it to Jasmine. And if you, again, no PII, but just like a situation that comes to mind of like, that is wild. I would have never connected trafficking to that.
Oh, I think that's a really good one. I don't have that case where it was like that shocker. But I would say there was some in the past where I had a youth that was 15 that was working in a strip club. And it was just very interesting because in your head, you're like, okay, I'm thinking you have to submit some type of birth certificate or some type of ID. But her response, and when working with her, it was just like, well, I was pretty, so they didn't ask for anything. No identification, didn't have to fill out any forms or different things like that. If I had another one where I was thinking of a case where it was more of like a shocker, was where I had two youth that were actively engaging. They did not have a human trafficker per se, but they refer themselves as sugar babies. So they were getting money from sending their pictures on like Instagram or Snapchat, and they did have a vault, but they didn't have a price list. So it was them two doing it together. The older one got charged with human trafficking, but they were friends. So looking at the dynamic, it was very interesting for a lot of psychoeducation and having to have those conversations. But it was the younger one's idea, but the older one had the ability to kind of control the situation, if that makes sense. They had the means, the transportation, the access to the phones. So without releasing any PII or any information like that, that's what I could think about. How about our panelist?
Yeah, I can share from a labor trafficking point of view. I had worked with a family for a very long time, and my image of this family is that it's a single mom. She's works 2 to 3 jobs if she has to get her daughters ahead. Um, and so it was just, and very respectful, both the parent, both the youth. Um, there was no really high indicators at the beginning, right? All just believing that like just family going through a tough time, right? But then later learning on later that one of the two of the youth were being forced to like work overnight with the parent, right? And so sometimes you're like, okay, the parent, has the best interest of the child. They know what they're doing, right? And so like, and I agree. I think most parents know what their circumstances are at home, what kind of youth they have, etc., right? But what they often don't understand is how things are different, that then connected, right? The parent didn't think like, well, my youth is not being harmed, right? They're not, nothing is happening to them. If anything, I have my eyes on them and they're coming to work with me. I think the job at the time was like cleaning something, overnight. And so, but what was happening was that the next day, the kids were expected to go to school. So they stayed up all night. They have to go to school the next day. They come home, maybe they rest, maybe they do homework, and then they're going back to work again, right? And so like it comes from this point of view of like that I'm probably gonna touch on a little bit more later too, but just kind of like that different cultures see things differently. And so sometimes we will see and every how do I say this? Too much of anything is, a bad thing, right? And so that's kind of how I feel about that piece of like sometimes the parents are really struggling incredibly, right? And they're really in a tough situation where they're really trying to survive. And so they will then push their youth to limits that they think that they can handle because they're young, because they don't have in quotes other responsibilities except for showing up to school, right? And so they're thinking that like it's not a big deal, right? At the end of the day, we need to pay the rent, we need to buy food, we need to pay phone bills, right, etc. But it's actually then can very quickly become a situation where the youth is being forced, whether that's like physically or they're coerced, right? And then now they are kind of trapped in this cycle where they can't get out of. Pass it on to anybody else who wants to add.
I can talk a little bit. I don't know if I necessarily have a case example. My example is more based on just exposure and what I have found in my own, I don't want to say personal life, but as a parent of a 13-year-old, I go through her phone, I, see what she's looking at. And I've been seeing on TikTok that there's lots of reposts of screenshotted text messages of girls, say or girls or boys saying, I'll give you this pic for DoorDash, things like that. And so that prompted me to have a conversation with my daughter because I know she is seeing this. And I said, well, what do you think of this? What do you see happening here? And she's like, Mom, that's not right. You shouldn't be sending pictures to anybody, things like that. But I know as a parent who is constantly monitoring my child's social media, how to talk to her about that. But in my mind, I know so many of her friends that don't have that same situation. And it's more of this exposure of normalcy to these children. That this is how you can get your DoorDash, how you can get your Starbucks, how you can get, you know, um, I don't know, Chipotle, whatever it is that they are trying to get, they can use their bodies, they can use technology, all of that to make that happen for themselves. They don't have to go through Apple Pay or get their parents' money, things like that. So that has me concerned as a parent, wanting to expand and change some of my outreach as human trafficking regional navigator, and getting more information out there that this is also part of trafficking. Because I think going back to some of the misconceptions, people don't see that as trafficking. People see that as, oh, they're kids being kids, sexting, trading photos, things like that. So just getting that education that is part of the ever expanding definition of what human trafficking is very important to me. And that was like one of my aha moments.
I'll piggyback off of Erica. I think I had the same outlet when I saw all the Roblox, Minecraft, TikTok, Discord. I was like, I told my niece, I said, absolutely not. No. You go ahead and give me that tablet. Let me look through it all. Let me go ahead and delete all this. No more TikTok. And then I was like, okay, let me just do some research and think of ways that I can put in some type of app for her mom because my kids are gonna hate me, but yeah, that's just what's gonna have to happen. But I did some research, so now I can I help moms put this app on the phone, and I hide it in I make on iPhones or Androids, you can make a whole block of apps, and then you can hide it within apps. So I teach moms how to do that now because a lot of some moms are not tech savvy. So they're like, if I take the phone completely, then there's a chance she's going to run away or he's going to run away. Because if I isolate them from what they love the most, then that's the worst thing on earth in their mind that's happening in this moment. Instead of just go to your room with your phone, I'm taking it away, stare at a wall. That's worse. They're going to escalate. So instead, you can monitor it, but just take all the ways that they can communicate with others outside. And they'll get frustrated, but they're safe. So I think that's what I've learned. I was like, wow, these individuals that are targeting youth, they work 24 hours a day. Like they don't stop. It's insane.
I appreciate, first of all, thank you guys, because I told you I was going to go rogue on this one and ask you guys some wherever the questions flow, the questions are flowing. And I think that's just a good, even just like a good insight into what navigators are seeing, because it's not like, hey, these are my specific cases. It's like, oh, and did you know this other intersection of trafficking because it's happening and it's a thing. And I think that this field, I'm biased because I am in this field, but I think it moves really fast and there's a lot of research and a lot of data and what we understood about trafficking just 10 years ago pre-COVID is so different now. And I keep saying I'm gonna say it again, COVID, but it really, I think, was the pivotal moment of moving a lot of things online. And we say it all the time, you can safely traffic yourself out of the comfort of your own home as long as you have access to the internet. So, and Erica, I would love to throw it back to you just because this parenting thing is clearly stuck in my mind. And then I'm going to throw it to Julia because I'd love to get more into forced crim and some other labor trafficking stuff. But Erica, I have my main question for you would be, is what you had said was now it is altering, pivoting the way that you are doing some of your outreach and training. What would be some of the main resources that you would suggest for anyone who even just know parent, caregiver, or do you know a kid?
NCMEC has a lot of great resources. Shared Hope has a lot of great resources and data. The Blue campaign has a lot of good resources. And I try to report as much as I can locally what I'm seeing too. For example, I'm giving a training to our Cecil County Public Schools guidance counselors and administrators at the end of this month. And I don't want to take them the presentation I showed them 2 years ago. So I want to update it a little bit, and I want to put more in there about CSAM and how CSAM and photographs are also part of commercial sex now. So give them hard, concrete, I guess I don't want to say scenarios, but maybe examples that they can equate to what human trafficking is. It's not just people taking people and forcing them. It's also online vulnerability. It's also these random exchanges of DoorDash for pictures, things like that. Those are things that they need to be looking for, that I'm sure the guidance counselors are hearing a lot, because a lot of kids talk to the guidance counselors, and maybe get a little bit more intervention.
And Jasmine had just put in the chat, the Love 146 resource is also a good one as well. Now just to pivot just a bit, I'd love to throw it back over to Julia and talk about more, and let's just like rip the Band-Aid off. Like, we live in this unprecedented times. How has really like this climate impacted, like you were at the University of Maryland Safe Center, so and you cover Montgomery County and Prince George's counties, whereas where I was a navigator in Lower Shore, Worcester, Wycomico, and Somerset, our clientele looked very different, you could say. So I would love to get your input on some of the I don't want to say trends, because I don't like that in this. It's like just the easiest thing that's coming to my mind. Like, what are you guys seeing on the labor trafficking aspect? Not just that, but how is immigration impacting some of your typical referrals?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Danielle. And I think it's goes without saying that like policy affects us all, and it highly affects survivors, especially in this time and age, immigrants. Kind of how Danielle shared in my bio, right? I'm a daughter of immigrants, and so this is a community that I've lived in my entire life and that I still continue to live in. And so I understand what it means to be, even though I myself am not an immigrant, right? I understand the perspective of what it means to be someone who has to try twice as hard to get just by, right? And so that being said, that like that is something that I particularly I'm a bilingual case manager, and so 90% of my caseload is Spanish speaking and immigrant, or other speaking and immigrant. And so it's very common. And that being because we're aware that there are a lot of vulnerabilities that affect all kind of human trafficking and any individual, but specifically being on a company minor, being a youth who didn't come with their parents, they migrated on their own, right? Or they migrated to come be with family that they've never known, or they're immigrants themselves and they brought along their home family, and now they have to not just survive for themselves, but survive with their families as well, right? But that being said, that when it comes to like the immigrant community, we're continuously losing the supports even for trafficking survivors. I was just on a technical call with the National Immigrant Women's I've got to remember what it's called, NEWAP. And so they support us so much when we're trying to figure out how can we apply for benefits, how can we do this and that, right? But as y'all might be aware, the large bill, right, that was passed took away a lot of benefits for our immigrant communities. So now survivors are not eligible for SNAP. Survivors are about to get their Medicaid cut off, and they're not able to get any kind of cash assistance unless they have children or they have disabilities, which is not every survivor's case. So that being said, it puts them in a more vulnerable position, even so, to be taken advantage of. A question that is even asked sometimes on screenings for human trafficking is, has somebody like threatened you, right, with calling immigration, right? That is now something that is being upheld by law, right? That it's okay to do that, right? Which is really disgusting for our community, for those who are immigrants and those who are not, right? Because we're all intertwined, right? We're all supporting each other in one way or another. But that being said, that it's also becoming increasingly more difficult for people to speak out that something is happening, because now they're like, okay, someone can call ICE on me, and they can actually do that, and a lot of terrible things could happen to me, right? And the fear is a lot more real. And as well, that they're not like coming out in general. So there's like community fairs or things like that where you would get this information, or even at school events, right, where parents are not able to like feel safe to go. Just last week at a community in Gaithersburg, there was child drop off for summer camp, and ICE came and they detained the mom, right? And so it's like, you're not even safe to go to drop off your kid to summer camp. You're less gonna go to some informational meeting that you think is like too high risk, right? And so that being said, that like if we're kind of talking about data and how like we're not seeing people being represented, immigrants are more being pushed into the shadows, and that goes back into like what I was saying of like sometimes you have to cut corners. I can't afford childcare, or I can't make the drive to childcare now. So now eldest child, you have to take care of the siblings, right? Because this is the only way we're gonna survive, right? Or I can't go to my job, right? So I have to do some kind of activity or something that's under the table that would constitute as some kind of trafficking, right? But this is all I have. And so that being said, that like families are really being pushed, people, individuals, etc., right, are really being pushed into a corner, which is really troubling. And the community is trying their best to kind of respond as best we can. Us, mutual aid partners in the group, in the community, all over Maryland, which I'm happy to see. But it does take more than just us being able to provide the direct support, which is needed, right? Food, rides to places so people feel safe going to the doctors or whatever. But it goes deeper to that, to really being, what's the word? Being, wow, I'm trying to find the right word, just honestly being outraged about what's going on, right? To make noise for our survivors, for our communities. And then on the topic of trafficking, right? Especially such a vulnerable community that's already been through a lot, right? Especially if they've been identified or they have already experienced things, and it's that much harder to then try to see a different light of a life, right? It's like, if nothing has changed in the policy of the world around me, how do I expect myself to change the way that I've been able to survive thus far, right? It's my 2 cents on that.
Thank you. And for one, that's just heavy. And I know that we have conversations about it as like our navigator group, like here and there, but I think as things, progress, but like days are days and days go by and things change, that it's always nice to hear like an update, or like what's really happening on the ground. What are you as a direct service provider, specializing in a specific population, and have specific expertise on this specific population? It's always, I appreciate you guys being able to just share that pulse point with everyone else, especially like we said earlier, like people who are on different sides of the state who might not be seeing that as frequently, because like you said, policy affects everyone. So I appreciate you sharing more with that as well. I know that we're at 6:50, so we have a handful more minutes. My last question for you guys, and I'm going to put this out for anyone else if we have, I know Melinda is here, I see Sylvia as well. If you guys want to join this part of our conversation, feel free to turn your camera on and we can get you spotlighted in with us. But my question for you guys is, okay, so we're talking about youth, we're talking about young adults, and as the days go by, none of us are getting any younger. Sorry for that super awesome fact of life. But sometimes I know I'm so rude. Okay. My body is also feeling like I am old, and it's almost past my bedtime at 6:50. But when we are working with youth and young adults, how do you build rapport? I'm like, hi, I'm Danielle. I'm a white girl with a bunch of education, and I think that I know everything, and I have some ballet flats, and you are just gonna have to trust that I have all the answers. Like, how do you come across, especially with clients, right? And like when we talk about trafficking clients, we can go back to research and talk about how many times, especially youth and child trafficking survivors, will go back to the life or back to their trafficker, back to an exploitative situation multiple times to get their needs met. I know me personally, I have experienced that very firsthand with some of the survivors that I have worked with as a regional navigator. And that can be just like a lot, but that it's a bigger puzzle piece of like building that rapport, right? And like one of the best things that happened to me as a navigator was this this client's fifth time running away. And when she came back, she called me. She was like, "Hey, I'm back." I was like, "Oh my God, I made it." Like, she likes me. And sometimes it's like those little things, right? And how do you as a navigator build rapport with clients who, one, like Erica said earlier, might not even see themselves as a victim, because we already know nobody's out here being like, "Hi, it's me. I'm being sex trafficked," or "I'm being labor trafficked." They're not doing that. They barely even know that they're victims in the first place. So how, like, that's a tricky place to be in. And then for you to just be like, "Yeah, I just want to like give you resources and like help out and like, support." And they're like, and teenage females are already one type of way. I know I was one. I can't imagine having to work with them day in and day out and trying to connect with them on a level after their like a baseline of trauma. So Adriana, I'm going to throw it to you first, but I would love all of you to share just a little bit of insight of what is your specialty? What's your like sweet sauce of building some rapport with new clients?
Thank you. I think I mean, if anyone knows me, like I'm always telling jokes. I'm a big jokester. I always tell jokes, but I never make it, I'm never gonna be too serious. Like I'm never gonna be like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." It's just not what you, in my opinion, should open up with. I think that if they are being, told by, if they're in criminal case and they're being told by law enforcement, like, "This is really bad, this is what's happened to you," they're not going to want to come to me and hear the exact same thing. Or they're talking to CPS and being like, "Tell me what's going on in the home." They're not going to want to come to my office and do that. So I usually bring out slime. Jen hates it because I make a whole mess, but it's just going to keep on happening. It's all right. I haven't lost my job. But I do Uno, I do Connect Four. I've been beaten in Connect Four recently. I'm very competitive when I play, but I also talk when I play. So I'm like, "Oh, what's your favorite subject in school?" And they teach me a lot of things. I've done math homework before, and I'm like, "Whew, I'm a little bit outside of high school. I know I'm only, a little bit, but I feel like I've been out of high school. I feel like I'm like, I don't know, my back's starting to give out. But it's just, I feel like the best thing for me to do is just come as me. That's the best thing I can do. Because then I don't ask them to call me Miss Adriana or Miss Smith. Call me what you want. If you want to cut my name in half, call me Adri, call me Anna, call me Adriana. I don't care what you call me, as long as you're respectful. But I don't, and sometimes they may not be respectful to me. Sometimes they may be like, "Adriana, I'm really mad. You didn't answer my text when it was outside of my work hours." And I'm like, "I get it. I get your frustrations." But I think the main part of how, the kind of, I guess, the sauce that I got is I'm just, I joke around, but I also get real when I need to get real. When there's a situation that has occurred and I need a safety plan and I need to make sure that you're going to be okay. Because, when school lets out, there's some of my clients that I don't get to speak to. Some of them go MIA and I have to go find them when school gets start back up. So starting the end of school is really crucial for me to continue to safety plan and continue to build that rapport. Because if I don't, they're not going to think about me during the summer. And if I just constantly talk about serious things or lecture them, they're going to be like, no, she's like a therapist. And that's not my role. So I think that's the best thing, is to just be yourself and just let them know that, I may make mistakes. I may not know what to say sometimes. We may just sit in silence, but I'm here. And that's what matters the most.
That's really real, Adriana. I just had an incident like that where I had a youth that I was working with, and every time we met, it was always negative. They were always just like, I felt like I wasn't getting through. And every time I had a meeting, I was like, "I don't know what we're going to talk about, but I'm just going to hear them out." And which is exactly what I did. I heard them out on all their frustrations. I validated their feelings. I think it's important to not like, because obviously a youth tells you something concerning and immediately you're like, "Oh, don't do that," right? But it's like you tell them that, and then like Adriana said, then it's like, "I don't know, listening to you," right? But it's like, okay, I had a youth who was saying like, "Yeah, I want to emancipate," right? I'm like, "All right, well, let's talk about what it means to be for you to be independent," right? We need to like talk about life skills now. Like instead of shutting it down and being like you're crazy or anything, it's like, no, this is what your topic of interest, right? Let's see how we can actually like build upon this, right? And so that youth, right, I continuously was feeling like I don't know if they really trust me or if they feel like I'm somebody in their support circle. But over the weekend, similarly, like when I wasn't able to answer, right, I got a call and spoke with mom, or I got a text from them and spoke with mom on Monday, and she's like, "Yeah, she contacted you on this day because she actually overdosed, right?" And so I was like, "Oh wow!" Like it really opened my eyes of like, as much as I'm thinking that I'm not really getting through, right, just meeting them where they're at and like validating what they're experiencing can really go a long way.
I think being what everybody else is saying is, definitely on my radar and definitely things that I use, but just being low pressure, because particularly when I meet with a youth, they're usually there for some other reason. So there's CPS that's wanting to interview them, law enforcement wanting them to say all the things, the parent potentially in crisis. So you just want to be low pressure. You don't want to ask them to do more. So it's basically you're there for them. And another thing is just doing what you say you're going to do. Like if you say, I'm going to, get you a bag of clothing, or underwear or hygiene products, whatever it might be, you have to follow through with that because that's part of the rapport building process. Whatever they might need. And it's different for each child that comes in. Sometimes I'll start, if it's a low pressure situation, if it's a child at risk that has not confirmed a case, I might start a conversation with them about their nails. Or one girl came in, she's in the cosmetology program at her high school. I was asking about her lashes. I was like, oh, are they clusters? Are they real? Are they fake? Tell me about that. So I just tried to do low pressure conversations at first, and then playing games, and then, whatever they want to tell me. And part of that also is not to react negatively to whatever they say, because they're going to test you. So, just keeping an open mind. Okay, well, what do you mean? Tell me more about that. Something like that, Obviously, I used to be a forensic interviewer, but I wouldn't say tell me more about that. But, okay, well, what do you think about that? Stuff like that, not just controlling my reactions, keeping my voice level, keeping things down. So that's another tactic to build that rapport with them.
For me, those are a lot of great things that I kind of pull on to. For me, I probably get fussed out the most about this one, but I delay paperwork. I know, I delay paperwork. The reason why I delay paperwork is because I feel like working with the client is more important than some of the paperwork that I have to get done, right? So of course the program considers important, but the first thing that I do is to kind of like do the needs assessment and a safety exam first to make sure that they're okay. Like those are the most important ones. But then we start going shopping. So instead of like a needs assessment going through those questions, but like the need assessment, like what do you need right now that I have the ability to provide to you? Right. And so when we're going through the needs that they might have, I'm like, oh, let's get on Amazon. Let's start ordering the things that you might need, that it isn't an emergency. And so with that, I'm like, okay, well, where can I send this? Are you going to come to the office to pick these items up? Do you want me to drop them off to you, or do you want it to come to directly to your house? Again, not forensic interviewing them either, but with that information, I'm now able to either know that they're going to come back to see me to then go over that paperwork that we need to do, or I can get a location and be able to get in contact with them should I need to. And for me, what the needs assessment is also like, are you hungry? Let's go. We have Chick-fil-A gift cards. I can pick up Chick-fil-A for you, or you can go before coming to the office. We have McDonald's. What do you like? What type of food do you want to eat? So that's kind of my kind of window of like the shopping with the needs assessment. If it's something that my agency cannot provide, such as like shelter, and they are of age, I can say, oh, I don't have that assistance, but I do know someone. And so I make those contacts, similar to what kind of using Frederick model as well, for knowing our partners and not just having those conversations when I need something, but also having those active collaborative meetings and also like checking in on community partners. So when I'm calling, they know it's like, hey, I have a survivor with me right now, and they need that support, and they don't have to go through the whole process of an intake, because they know I'm calling for a reason, and then I need that housing right then and there. So if shelter is something that they're interested in and needing, I say, oh, I don't have that resource, but I do know someone, and this is their name and this is their phone number. We can call together, or you can call by yourself. They're going to be on vacation next week, so call this week. Or on this day. So that helps them with that building, with them feeling trusted that this is a community partner that I know, especially when I'm highlighting like, hey, they're on vacation or they get off at this time, please call them at this number. So that's kind of the different things that I use. When I try to use trauma-informed care, it's more so active listening, hearing what the client has to say and the things that they need, versus putting the program's requirements more on them, because it's not feasible for them. So for me, I say my biggest thing is I delay paperwork because I feel as though that is a program, not a survivor thing. But of course, the program consent is important, and going through that detail of why we need that consent and letting them know like, hey, you are working with this program and I need you to consent to services. If you don't consent to services, it doesn't mean that I can't work with you, but I can't work as in detail. I can give you my community partners information. We can even order the things that you need, but I can't continue to work with you until we have this agreed. That way, you know my scope, the boundaries, and all those different things. Hey, if you said you hated my shirt today and it offended you, you need to know who you're going to call, right? You need to know my supervisor's information. You need to know where we're getting this grant funding, and all of that information is in the program consent. So that's kind of how I do it. I'm not really good with jokes. I have that awkwardness with me. I don't know why, but I kind of use that like, hey, if you don't like my shirt and it's offending you, not saying that I'm wearing an offensive shirt, but if you don't like my shirt, you need to know who you need to contact, and that is in the program consent. So that's kind of what I use.
I love that all of you guys gave different answers, but all of you really just talked about autonomy and choice and how you give survivors autonomy and choice during that rapport process. And I think that's just such a need, especially like, and I know Mac had put it in well, Jasmine talked about Chick-fil-A, and then that got me going, but then Mac had said something else about food. And that was one of the things that I relied on a lot, right? Like, we don't know the last time that client ate, and I can tell you that if I don't eat, I get a little cranky. Like, they make whole Snickers commercials to explain that. Like, that's not just like a client thing, that's like humanity. And being able to, like, when was the last time that they were able to make a decision for themselves? So even just like Jasmine said, like, I think that's I love that. I love being like, because you're giving them the choice. Hey, you got a little taste of what my support and advocacy could look like. It's on you if you want it in the future, but this is what I'm going to need for you to do. I think that's just such it's so impactful, giving that choice back to survivors. So I appreciate you guys and all of your answers and hanging in with me this evening as I go rogue from the questions that we had previously discussed. I'm going to turn it over to Melinda and Mac, as I think we have